Have you ever felt silenced or unfairly treated, and what would you do if given the stage to speak? Dim fluorescent lights buzzed overhead in the cramped classroom, their harsh glow casting cold shadows along the peeling walls and scuffed metal desks. Jamal's gaze flickered nervously down to his worn notebook, a patchwork of inked verses, smudged margins, and jagged dreams. His fingers clenched the spiraled edge as the room fell oddly silent. The air seemed to thicken, heavy with expectation and a tremor of unspoken defiance. Slow footsteps echoed down the aisle as the teacher called out, "Jamal, your turn." Heart pounding like a drum in his chest, Jamal rose, his tall, lanky frame awkward amid a sea of uniformed bodies. His black hoodie hung loose over faded jeans, a stark contrast to the polished shoes and crisp shirts swirling with muted colors around him. He stepped forward, clutching the notebook like a fragile shield. The murmur of whispers rippled through the room, curious, skeptical, unfriendly. Jamal found his place beside the stage's modest step, lit by a solitary window that cast a diffused beam over his face, highlighting the nervous flush in his cheeks and the steady quake of his hands. He swallowed hard and began, voice soft but resolute. A world unseen, voices unheard, cracks in the silence where hope dares to stir. His words draped themselves tenderly over the stillness, the rhythm and rhyme a fragile thread weaving through the muted classroom. Yet from the back, the sharp rasp of a sneer pierced the air. "What's this, some kind of joke?" Kyle's voice rang out, a taunting growl, fueled by popular swagger and raw prejudice. His laughter was cruel, a weapon forged in the dull fire of ignorance. The class erupted. Snickers bounced off the walls, eyes narrowing, some shielding smirks behind turned heads. The teacher, uninspired and disengaged, continued grading papers with indifferent posture, casting only a fleeting glance in Jamal's direction. Jamal's smile faltered, the warmth draining from his face. The words he had bled onto his pages now felt tattered, exposed, mocked into fragility. The air around him closed in, the glowing light from the window now a harsh spotlight magnifying his vulnerability. He clenched his fists tightly, the notebook trembling with every suppressed breath. Each cruel whisper and pointed laugh felt like invisible chains, binding his voice, his spirit, his very self. Yet, beneath the torment, the worn pages in his hands pulsed faintly, a silent heartbeat of strength, waiting to rise against the shadows. The room's laughter dimmed to a taunting echo as Jamal stood still, alone but not broken, his eyes locked on the pages that held his truth. The distant hum of the city seeped through the cracked window, the world alive with stories yet untold. He remained rooted, the tension thick, the muted light casting long, fragile shadows over the worn notebook, the symbol of his silenced voice and the fragile hope that his words might one day break free. The camera held on Jamal's face, a portrait of quiet resilience amid the muted storm, a moment suspended between humiliation and the first breath of resistance. The heavy metal door of the school bathroom closed with a sharp clang behind Jamal, sealing him away from the hushed snickers and shifting murmurs that still echoed down the corridor. The stale air, tinged faintly with bleach and the metallic scent of cold fixtures, wrapped around him like a cold shroud. Under the harsh fluorescent light, his reflection in the cracked mirror was pale and drawn. His eyes, once bright and hopeful, now flickered with a quiet storm of doubt and exhaustion. He sank onto the cold ceramic sink edge, fingers trembling as he clutched the worn notebook, the pages inside a chaotic labyrinth of pain, hope, and truth. Each word he had bled onto the paper felt like a fragile lifeline, yet the violent laughter and Kyle's cutting jeers left invisible bruises pressing against his ribcage. The classroom's dim light now seemed to mock the warmth he had tried to summon. His breath hitched as a faint hum of the school day outside reminded him of the world he was still part of, a world seemingly indifferent to his voice. The stark white walls closed in, the somber black-tiled floor reflecting none of the vibrant dreams housed within his pages. A shaky inhale, a whispered plea to the quiet corners that had hidden his tears before. Why speak if the world won't listen? The silence responded, laden with the weight of unseen struggles and battles waged within forgotten hallways. Jamal's thoughts spiraled, a mix of anger at the cruelty wrapped in Kyle's words, sorrow for the isolation sharply etched into his existence, and a burgeoning, flickering spark of defiance fighting beneath the surface. His gaze shifted to the chain-link locker across the hall, its twisted metal a fractured symbol of bondage. Yet, in that broken chain, Jamal found an unspoken emblem of resistance, of chains shattered and voices breaking free. He opened his notebook slowly, fingertips tracing the jagged edges of his verses. Each line was a shard of his soul, a beacon that refused to dim despite the storm raging within. Jamal's lips moved soundlessly, mouthing the words that had been ripped apart in the classroom, the silent echo of a plea for justice and recognition. A glint from the cracked mirror caught his eye's silhouette etched against the cold glass, fighting to hold space in a world determined to erase him. In that fragile image, still and unyielding, lay the first tremor of resilience building beneath the weight of rejection. The bathroom's fluorescent light flickered once, twice, then steadied, a subtle reminder that even in the dimmest places, the pulse of hope endured. Jamal rose, the worn notebook pressed tightly to his chest, each step a fragile testament to a voice refusing to be silenced. The camera lingered on the door as it opened slowly, spilling muted daylight into the confined space, a tentative promise of light breaking through shadows. In that slow, deliberate moment, the narrative hung poised, balanced between the crushing weight of invisibility and the first, hesitant breath of courage that dared to speak anew. The city breathed a heavy dusk as Jamal's footsteps traced the uneven pavement home, the worn pages of his notebook folded safe within his jacket. The thick air carried an indistinct mixture of rain and smog, blurring street lamps into halos of distant fire. His mind replayed the cruel laughter and the piercing words that had shattered his tentative courage earlier in that suffocating classroom, a moment suspended between pain and silent defiance. A flickering neon sign buzzed erratically above an abandoned storefront as Jamal passed, its intermittent glow mirroring his thoughts, fractured yet persistent. His hands, rough and trembling, brushed against the worn leather spine of an old anthology he'd found waiting for him on the cracked windowsill of his small apartment. His mother's anthology, a quiet rebellion bound in verses and passion, the legacy of a woman who carried fire in her heart against the cold winds of injustice. He settled against the peeling brick wall, the chill seeping through his hoodie, a sensory reminder of raw vulnerability. The smell of old paper mingled with the faint scent of jasmine from a nearby garden. Opening the anthology, he traced the familiar handwriting, words breathing with past struggles and undying hope. The poetry pulsed life into the silence that had once threatened to swallow him whole. Jamal's breath steadied as the verses echoed in his mind, each line a step toward reclaiming a voice once drowned in jeers and indifference. His eyes lifted to the framed photograph perched on the cracked windowsill, a faded image of his mother speaking passionately at a community meeting, her fierce eyes incandescent under the streetlight. Her voice, though silent in the still room, resonated with an unyielding strength that transcended generations. Suddenly, the gritty silence of the city pulsed with possibility. He felt the worn notebook as more than just pages. It was a vessel of resilience, a bridge between quiet despair and vibrant defiance. The broken chain symbol etched on its cover mocked the weight of his silence, challenging him to break free. A solitary crow's distant caw sliced through the evening air, a stark, sharp sound that seemed both warning and call to arms. Jamal's gaze lifted toward the darkening sky where the raven soared, an emblem of secrets and impending change etched into the fabric of his world. The rain began light at first, a tentative rhythm tapping on the cracked pavement. Each drop shimmered under the flickering streetlight, a quiet symphony weaving an anthem for the unheard. Jamal closed the anthology but held it close, a newfound fire kindling beneath the smoldering ashes of humiliation and doubt. His eyes gleamed with clarity, a fragile but undeniable spark against the encroaching darkness. He rose slowly, notebook and anthology in hand, stepping forward beneath the rain's gentle percussion. The camera held tight on his determined stride, the cityscape blurring behind him as the muted shadows receded, yielding to the promise of dawn. In that suspended moment, Jamal transformed from victim to vessel-bearer of stories waiting to ripple through voices, faces, walls, and hearts. The screen faded on the broken chain symbol, its fractured links glowing faintly under the rain-kissed street lamp, a silent vow of resilience and the relentless pursuit of justice. The fading amber light of a late afternoon drifted through the cracked window of the community center room where Jamal sat among a scattered group of teenagers, his worn notebook clutched tightly in his hands. The peeling paint and scuffed wooden floor bore witness to countless gatherings marked by whispers and dreams. Tonight, it seemed the air itself held the fragile promise of change. From the corner, faint strains of a guitar echoed softly, a backdrop to the tentative energy pulsing just beneath the surface. Jamal's heart thundered as he leaned forward, catching the words of the young poet before him, words raw and courageous, echoing truths Jamal barely dared to voice. The room's muted buzz crackled with anticipation, the spotlight a slanted beam of hope cutting through dimness. Around him, faces sharp with expectation shifted, their gazes flickering between skepticism and awe. When it was his turn, Jamal's fingers trembled slightly, the weight of his thoughts and fears heavy yet fueling. He stepped to the worn mic with the practiced hesitation of someone stepping onto a stage far bigger than himself. The spotlight caught his features, tall and lanky, eyes bright despite the shadow of past ridicule. He cleared his throat silently, and then, voice steady but charged with emotion, he began. In the silence of streets where our stories are swallowed, I find the cracks where light fights strangers in the shadows. Each verse a chain, unbroken and raw, each word a step toward the justice we've long been denied. The verses poured out earnest, aching, a testament to pain and hope intertwined. The room, once tentative, began to lean in, breaths held fast like a collective heartbeat. Yet beneath the rising tide of support lurked Jamal's own lingering fear: would this voice be truly heard, or crushed again beneath the weight of indifference? The applause, tentative at first, swelled with raw authenticity. Faces softened, shoulders straightened, but Jamal's gaze flicked unconventionally to the back where Kyle loomed, eyes narrowed, lips curled with a venomous smirk that threatened to unravel the fragile moment. After the final word hung in the air, the applause clapped sharply, a flickering beacon in the dusk. Jamal's breath came quicker now, not purely from fear, but from the first embers of belief glowing inside. His worn notebook rested heavily in his hands, each page a battleground of his soul. Exiting the stage, Jamal was greeted by quiet nods and a few tentative smiles, small victories etched into the crowded room. The weight of battle was far from over. Kyle's shadow stretched longer than ever, but for once, Jamal felt the stirrings of an awakening not just in himself, but in a gathering community. The camera lingered on Jamal's resolute expression as he tucked his notebook under his arm, a fortress of words against the storm to come. Outside, dusk settled fully, city lights igniting like distant stars, a tapestry of endless possibilities and relentless challenges. A sudden rattle echoed from the locked rear door, a subtle but ominous reminder. The fight had just begun. Jamal's eyes narrowed thoughtfully, the flickering neon outside his window painting half his face in sharp contrast, a moment poised on the fragile, exhilarating cusp of change. Jamal's footsteps echoed softly down the vacant stairwell, the worn pages of his notebook pressed firmly against his chest, a fragile shield against the mounting storm. The evening air, thick with the hum of distant city life and the faint murmur of voices from another world, enveloped him like a shroud. Inside, a turbulent sea of doubt and resolve churned relentlessly. The local poetry workshop had been his sanctuary, a place where the sharp sting of ridicule was replaced by shouted encouragement, nods of respect, and moments of fleeting triumph. Tonight, standing under the dim glow of a solitary spotlight, Jamal had poured his heart into Versera and unfiltered his voice, a beacon in the murky shadows of his self-doubt. Yet even as applause rippled through the crowded room, a silent undercurrent threatened to erode his fragile victory. Kyle's shadow loomed larger than ever, a specter stalking the edges of Jamal's tentative rise. Rumors whispered through the halls, unfurling poisonous tendrils that threatened to poison trust, warp friendship, and shred the delicate fabric of alliances. In the cramped hallways of the school, glances sharpened into whispers. A teacher, eyes veiled with exhaustion and caution, offered moments of encouragement but stopped short of wholehearted support. Jamal sensed hesitation, a fragile barrier erected by fear and institutional complacency. "Don't let him see you break," a voice murmured near the bleachers, the words a fragile anchor tossed amidst the rising tide. Jamal nodded, swallowing the bitter taste of uncertainty, his gaze unwavering as fragments of determination flickered anew. The notebook in his hands was no longer just a repository of silent prayers. It was a battleground, each poem a strike, each rhyme an act of defiance. Night deepened, colors fading to muted blues and grays, and still, Jamal's journey stretched ahead, jagged and lit by the fractured hope forged in struggle. The flicker of neon outside the workshop's weathered windows painted streaks of light and shadow across the worn timbers, mirroring the delicate balance between his soaring dreams and crushing fears. But then came the whisper, a quiet yet potent revelation. A classmate, hesitant and wide-eyed, revealed in hushed tones an unexpected ally, a teacher with a past cloaked in mystery, someone who understood pain and power and the courage required to rise. This figure's help, half-hidden and uncertain, beckoned Jamal towards a fragile dawn. As the workshop dispersed, Jamal's fingers lingered on the folded note slipped inside his notebook, a silent gesture of solidarity and hope. Yet beneath the warmth there rippled a cold tide of foreboding, the promise of struggle yet to come. Outside, the city breathed, restless and vibrant, as Jamal walked beneath harsh streetlights casting long, wavering shadows, the broken chain on his notebook's cover catching a glint of light, a symbol of resolve amid oppression. His voice broke the silence, barely a whisper. Can one voice ignite a movement? The camera drifted upward, capturing the fractured skyline, a city poised between darkness and dawn, holding its breath as Jamal stepped into the uncertain light, ready to fight for the justice that had eluded so many. The scene faded on the flutter of a fragile locket around his neck, a token of hope tethered to legacy, as distant sirens sang an eerie lullaby and the night deepened, a world hanging on the cusp of change and the courage it summoned. The stale air of the community center reverberated with the low hum of anticipation as Jamal took the stage once more, the spotlight tracing his lanky frame, illuminating the nervous flicker in his eyes. The worn black hoodie felt heavier tonight, a second skin wrapped in vulnerability and resolve. The notebook, his sacred repository of raw emotion, sat opened on the small podium, pages worn, edges frayed, etched with the battles he had fought and the hopes he still clung to. Tonight was different. It was not just another performance, but a reckoning. As Jamal unleashed his poem, words exploding with fierce urgency and crafted grace, the room shifted. His voice, once tentative, now carried the weight of experience and an unyielding fight. Each line drew the audience deeper into his world, a world punctuated by invisible chains, broken promises, and the relentless struggle for dignity. But halfway through, a flicker of unease cut through the crowd. Unseen eyes recorded. A cell phone lifted discreetly from the shadows, an act as subtle as breath but carrying the power to change everything. Jamal finished, breath heavy, heart pounding. Applause erupted, mingled with whispered debates, some in awe, others skeptical, questioning, cruel. Days later, the video surfaced online, viral, polarizing. Praise flooded in alongside venomous criticism. Comments dragged old wounds into harsh sunlight, amplifying the pain alongside gratitude and solidarity. Back at school, the halls morphed into battlegrounds where every step Jamal took was shadowed by whispers and sideways glances. The cruel rumors Kyle hurled transformed from hushed commentary to frontline accusations. Yet, the support also grew, classmates offering quiet nods, teachers exchanging knowing looks. His presence had sparked conversations, uncomfortable yet vital. Yet, With every uplift, there came a counterweight, a confrontation late one afternoon in the library. Kyle approached, eyes cold and calculating. "Thought you'd keep quiet," he snarled. "But you're just a joke playing with words." Jamal's fists clenched, the notebook held tight as a shield. His voice, steady, though rippling with pain, met the challenge. "Words are weapons, Kyle. And they can break chains." Kyle laughed, a harsh, bitter sound that echoed in the quiet room before he stormed off, leaving Jamal trembling yet unyielding. In the solitude of his room, Jamal grappled with questions tormenting his soul. Was his voice enough? Could a single poem tilt the scales against decades of systemic shadow? What price was too high for truth? Yet, amid the storm, a glimmer appeared. An unexpected ally surfaced in the form of a teacher, whose quiet encouragement and own hidden past lent Jamal a fragile lifeline. This whispered support was a fragile thread woven through the chaos, a beacon in the murk. The camera lingered on Jamal's gaze, resolute, haunted, but alive before cutting to black. His whispered words echoed in the silence. "This is only the beginning." The broken chain symbol emblazoned on his notebook glowed faintly in the darkness, a whispered promise of battles to come and freedom yet to be seized. Dark clouds rolled over the city's skyline, blotting out the fragmented twilight and suffocating the final hues of a fading day. Jamal found himself alone on the school's deserted bleachers, the chill air biting beneath his thin black hoodie. The weight of recent betrayals pressed deep into his chest, making each breath a labor. His lanky frame slumped forward, hands trembling as they gripped the worn, dog-eared pages of his notebook, the last remaining connection to identity slipping fast through his grasp. The harsh fluorescent lights of the hallways, once a sterile glow of dull routine, now symbolized the cold indifference that had swallowed him whole. Kyle's words, sharp and ruthless, echoed as phantom wounds in the silent spaces between his thoughts. The rumor that had escalated from whispered slanders to absolute weaponized lies had spread relentlessly, fueled by those who saw Jamal's voice not as strength, but as threat. Jamal's mind spiraled through the stale memories. The rough shove in the locker-lined corridor, the staged confrontation that led to his suspension, the hollow eyes of teachers who turned away, telling him silently that his fight was his alone. The disinterest of authority was a wall he couldn't scale. Tears pricked the corners of his eyes but remained trapped, a silent testament to the fortress he'd been forced to build. The worn chains etched on the front cover of his notebook felt heavier now, symbols not just of systemic oppression but of a personal cage winding tighter with every callous act. A cold wind swept through the empty stadium, rattling the faded banners above and scattering a torn piece of paper along the cracked concrete at his feet. Jamal's gaze followed Ida's momentary float into the abyss, a fragile white fragment adrift in a storm of shadow. The silence around him deepened, crushing and absolute. The screams of laughter and scorn in the classroom seemed replaced by a void where even hope dared not echo. His voice, when it finally emerged, was a ghostly whisper. "What's left when even your own fight feels like losing?" The afternoon's gloom stretched long and oppressive, swallowing his form into the gray desolation of a world that felt too large, too cold, too indifferent. Clutching the notebook against his heart, Jamal closed his eyes, retreating inward to a space where dreams had once lived. The camera drew close, capturing the shadowed contours of a fragmented soul, isolated, fragile, yet unbroken. In the final frame, the faintest glimmer of light cracked through heavy clouds, overhead a delicate fissure, hesitant and unyielding, carrying the promise that even in the depths of despair, the fight for voice and justice would kindle anew. The night air was cold and unforgiving, wrapping around the city like a suffocating shroud. Jamal sat alone on the edge of an empty rooftop, the worn pages of his notebook resting heavily in his lap. The city below blurred into a mesh of distant lights and indistinct sounds, a world alive but painfully foreign to him now. The weight of recent events held him captive in a silence that echoed both outside and within, a relentless void tightening around his chest. Every breath was sharp and shallow. The chill seeped through the fabric of his black hoodie, an almost tangible reminder of the isolation that had become his companion. The cracked concrete beneath him bore silent witness to his descent, fractured like the fragile hope he once carried. Around him, shadows stretched long and distorted under the weak glow of flickering lampposts, their forms resembling broken chains, symbols of oppression and struggle, now almost taunting in their stillness. His hands trembled as they traced the edges of the notebook, the ink-stained pages frayed and fragile, much like his spirit. The words written inside, once a strong heartbeat of his identity and resistance, now felt like distant echoes lost in an empty chamber. The silence around him hummed with ghosts of taunts, betrayals, and the crushing loneliness of rejection. A crow's sharp cry rent the night, a solitary sound that cut through the oppressive void, its call both foreboding and eerily familiar. Jamal's gaze lifted to the sky, where the dark silhouette of a raven passed across the pale moon, wings outstretched like a shadow that refused to be dispelled. The bird's flight mirrored his own suspended state, caught between despair and the faintest, flickering possibility of escape. His voice was scarcely a whisper, barely breaking the cold air. Does it even matter? The question lingered unanswered, swallowed by the looming stillness. His mind spiraled through memories of harsh laughter and disinterested glances, of the teacher's silent complicity, and Kyle's unyielding hostility. The city's distant sirens became a dirge, a mournful chorus underscoring the depths of his isolation. Jamal curled inward, the frayed edges of his hoodie wrapping like a cocoon, shielding him from the unbearable weight pressing down. The once vibrant colors of his dreams bled mute, swallowed by the heavy night. Yet within the stillness, the faint glint of the broken chain emblem on his notebook caught the occasional shimmer of moonlight, an echo of resilience amid ruin. The camera lingered on Jamal's bowed figure, surrounded by the vast, indifferent skyline. The desolation was complete. Hope seemed a distant, buried relic. As the night deepened, the silence thickened into a suffocating quiet, holding the world in suspended breath. The frame faded slowly to black, leaving only the faint outline of Jamal's solitary form, embodiment of isolation, despair, and the fragile edge before the dawn. The apartment was silent except for the distant hum of the city grinding against the night. Jamal lay curled on the floor beside a cracked window, the worn notebook resting heavy against his chest like a beating heart, a fragile tether to the part of himself he feared losing. The cold air seeped inside, brushing against his skin and carrying faint echoes of voices long gone and battles yet to come. His gaze, clouded and heavy, drifted upward to the peeling ceiling, then to the fractured glass window, where moonlight spilled in silvery streams. Each shard of glass caught the light, differently fragmented reflections that mirrors the shards of his scattered spirit. The broken chain emblem stamped on the notebook cover glimmered faintly, a quiet reminder of fight and freedom both lost and waited for. A soft rustling stirred the room. Jamal's hand moved slowly, trembling yet deliberate, across the desk to a faded photograph of his mother standing amid a crowd, her eyes fierce with conviction and hope. He touched the image with reverence, tracing the contours of her face as if drawing strength from a distant flame. The poem he had read in class, torn cruelly from his mouth by jeers, echoed now like a whispered vow. The words felt raw but alive, undimmed by scorn. In that fragile moment, the hollow ache in his chest transformed, shifting imperceptibly to a pulse of resolve. His breath caught softly when the envelope resting beside the photo trembled slightly as if pushed by an invisible breeze. With a fragile hand, he unfolded the letter inside, inked in familiar script, his teacher's words of quiet encouragement and unseen allies, hinting at networks of support beyond the visible world. "You are not alone," the letter whispered, the words wrapped in steadfast belief and the promise of a dawn beyond the night. Jamal's throat tightened, and tears welled silent and cleansing. The first faint light of dawn brushed the horizon, slanting through the window, casting long shadows that slowly receded, inviting the warmth of a new day. The camera held on Jamal's green eyes, now glistening with renewed life and fragile courageous seed planted beneath the ashes of despair. He sat slowly, the worn notebook rising with his breath, the congregation of broken chains and poems swirling around him as if alive. His voice, barely more than a whispered breath, broke the room's silence. Maybe this is the start. Outside, the city woke, its own rhythm pulsing with unspoken stories, waiting to be heard. The scene faded on the soft rustle of pages and the gentle tapping of a pen finding strength, the flickering candlelight steadying against a backdrop of expanding light and hope. The old gymnasium, once echoing with the shouts of rivalry and the clash of ambitions, now stood hushed in the quiet dawn of a new beginning. Pale golden rays seeped through the high crevices of broken windows, illuminating dust motes that floated like tiny stars in the lingering shadows. Jamal, dressed in his usual casual hoodie and jeans, stood at the center of the court, his silhouette both tentative and resolute. His eyes, once pools of doubt and fear, now held a flicker of emerging strength. The worn notebook rested lightly in his hands, its pages containing the fractured poems that once trembled on the brink of silence. Today, they felt like seeds of change, ready to sprout. The air was thick with the scent of old hardwood and lingering sweat, elements of a space that had seen pain and victory, struggle and resilience. Jamal's breathing was slow, grounding himself in the present, as memories flickered in his mind. The taunts, the sneers, Kyle's relentless glare, each a ghost whispering warnings of the storm that had almost swallowed his voice. Yet beneath those shadows, something new fluttered, a fragile whisper of hope, faint but persistent. Jamal looked down at the pages, fingers trembling momentarily before he gently traced the words with his finger. For a fleeting instant, the faintest smile touched his lips, a silent recognition that the fight for justice and voice had only just begun. A subtle shift in atmosphere. The muted gold of dawn started to grow richer, casting a warm hue over the coldness of yesterday's despair. The broken chain symbol, painted on the wall and once a reminder of oppression, shimmered softly in the light, a symbol not of defeat but of the promise to break free. Jamal's gaze lifted, slowly, as if awakening from a long night. His shoulders, once hunched under the weight of shame, began to straighten. His nervous hands, clutching the notebook, released their tremors, replaced by the unsteady but definite movement of tentative hope. From the outskirts, the distant sounds of the city waking up seeped into the silence, the distant rumble of traffic, the faint chirping of birds, a muted reminder that life persisted despite the darkness. A small, almost imperceptible act. Jamal took a deep breath, closing his eyes briefly, then opened them with a newfound quiet resolve. His voice, tentative but real, broke the silence, soft yet filled with depth. "I won't be unheard." The words hung in the air, fragile yet powerful, as the first light of dawn finally crested over the horizon, spilling across the empty court. Shadows receded, warmth spread inward, and the horizon promised more than just a new day, it heralded the seeds of an awakening. Jamal looked at the wall, where the broken chain symbol seemed to glow ever so slightly in the morning light, a silent affirmation that even the tiniest voice could spark change. With cautious steps, he turned toward the city outside, a solitary figure on the cusp of a greater storm of uprising, carrying the torch of resilience as morning broke into hope. The auditorium was cloaked in a tense hush, the air thick with anticipation. Jamal, clutching his worn notebook, stepped cautiously onto the stage, the spotlight a stark, unforgiving circle amid the darkened room. His lanky frame was tense, each movement deliberate, like he was carving out a space for his voice in a world long convinced of his silence. The audience, a mix of students and teachers, sat frozen, the weight of history hanging heavily between them. The faint rustle of program pages and the shifting of seats were the only sounds. Jamal's chest tightened, muscles clenched with a mixture of fear and purpose. He adjusted his hoodie, a small act that grounded him amidst the whirlwind of doubts. He took a deep breath, his nervous hands trembling slightly as they opened to the first page of his poem. His voice broke the silence, In this space, I stand silent. No more. A hush swept through the room as he recited, each word raw and unfiltered, cutting through the thick layers of oppression and fear. The words poured out like a river, carrying the collective weight of every silent plea for justice, every whispered hope buried beneath systemic silence. His voice grew steadier, more confident, as he traced the broken chain of oppression, the symbol of how resilience can fracture chains too strong to see. As he finished, silence reigned, deafening, expectant. Then, slowly, the room erupted applause, first tentative, then swelling into a thunderous affirmation. Jamal's eyes flickered with a mixture of relief and rising strength, each clap echoing like a broken link reforged. Kyle, seated at the back, the embodiment of systemic prejudice, stared in stunned silence, the smirk wiped from his face. No sneer, no jeer, just a contemplative stare, as if the boy who had once been invisible had pierced the darkness without so much as a single shout. Jamal, breath-catching, stepped back subtly, the broken chain symbol softly glowing behind him, a testament to a new dawn. The applause washed over him, a wave of collective recognition, a moment where silence transformed into power. But beneath the triumphant surface, the room hummed with uncertainty. The shadows of doubt flickered behind the smiles, the unspoken fears of retaliation, of a system that could still recoil and strike back. In that moment, in that stage, Jamal saw what few others dared to see, the fragile yet fierce possibility that the smallest voice could ignite monumental change. He looked down at his trembling hands, guilty of hope, proud of resilience, and finally, unapologetically, ready to rise. The camera slowly pulled away, framing his silhouette against the rising light, an emblem of the quiet power that tiptoed toward revolution amid the stillness. The auditorium, dimly lit just hours before dawn, now shimmered with the first faint light filtering through stained glass, casting fractured rainbows across the old wooden floor. Jamal, standing at the center, was a different figure than the boy who had tremblingly stepped onto the stage just days ago. His tall, lanky frame was straight, shoulders squared not from pride but from an unshakable resolve. His dark hoodie hung loose, but his eyes sparkled with a renewed fire, a quiet storm of hope and justice. The worn notebook rested on the podium, its cover marked with smudges that told stories of battles fought and voices forged. Jamal's fingers brushed over the pages, not anxiously but deliberately, as if tracing the path from silence to power. The silence in the room was absolute, a sacred space holding its breath. He took a slow breath, the air thick with anticipation, and looked into the hushed crowd. The silence was no longer oppressive. It had become reverent, a canvas waiting for the next stroke of truth. As he began to recite his poem, his voice grew steady. Each word was a seed planted in the fertile soil of collective hope, each pause a deep breath in the fight against systemic silence. In the quiet, we whisper truths louder than sirens, stronger than chains. Our voices echo past the walls built to contain us. The words resonated through the space, powerful and unshakable. White-hot rays of dawn slipped past the stained glass, illuminating his figure like a hero reborn. His voice was full of conviction, each line building on the last, the broken chain now a symbol of victory, not oppression. The audience sat spellbound, some with tears in their eyes, others with clenched fists, but all bound by the unbreakable thread of unity. From the back, Kyle's face was a mask of introspection and unspoken acknowledgement that his dominance had been challenged, that silence could no longer be commanded. The room erupted in applause, the sound swelling into a storm of recognition and hope. Jamal's gaze met Kyle's silent confrontation and a fragile truce, the moment a testament to the power of perseverance and truth. Slowly, Jamal stepped back, the broken chain symbol shining brightly behind him, a relic of oppression shattered. The camera panned out to capture his silhouette against the vibrant dawn, a symbol of steadfast resilience and transformation. As the applause faded into a steady hum of awakening, Jamal closed his eyes, feeling the weight of all that he had overcome. The silence lingered softly, inscribed with the promise that every voice, no matter how small, had the power to change the world. In that moment, the moment of quiet victory, the scene held focused on a young man whose voice was finally heard, whose courage had turned despair into collective strength. The light grew stronger, bathing the stage in hope as the world outside began to stir to a new dawn, ready to listen. The first light of dawn spilled gently across the city skyline, its warm hues melting away the shadows that clung to the edges of the towering buildings. Jamal stood at the window of his modest apartment, gazing out over a world that had begun to stir, people moving through streets alive with hope and cautious optimism. The air was crisp, tinged with the scent of wet pavement and blooming jasmine from a nearby garden, symbols of renewal and resilience. His hand gently rested on the worn notebook, its cover battered and pages yellowed from years of silent strength. The weight of yesterday's victories, struggles, and sacrifices pressed softly against his chest, yet now, they felt like part of a larger, undeniable force, a quiet revolution that had finally found its voice. Jamal's eyes, still vivid with determination, reflected the rising sun, a silent affirmation that in the smallest voices, truth and hope could grow into monumental change. The city shimmered in the morning light, each shining window a testament to countless stories of perseverance and the power of shared stories. The soft glow of sunlight spilled onto his face, illuminating the faint smile curling his lips, a smile not born of arrogance, but of recognition and gentle acceptance. His fingers brushed over the pages of the notebook, the ink now a symbol of collective courage. With a deep breath, Jamal closed his eyes for a moment, listening to the distant sounds of life, awakening car horns, children playing, footsteps echoing on the sidewalk, each one a part of a changing world, moving forward. He slowly turned from the window, the weight on his shoulders lightening, replaced by an almost imperceptible sense of peace. His posture was straight, shoulders back, an unspoken declaration that he was no longer invisible, no longer silenced. Every step he took was deliberate, a reaffirmation that even in silence, his words carried the power to ripple outward. In the quiet, the broken chain emblem on his notebook seemed to glow faintly, a symbol of overcoming oppression, its fractures symbolizing not defeat but the beginning of liberation. Jamal looked into the room's reflective surface, the faintest flicker of a confident smile touching his lips. The boy who once hid in shadows now stood poised at the dawn of a new chapter, one where his voice could no longer be ignored. As the camera slowly pulled back, capturing his silhouette against the rising sun, a sense of calm settled, a reassurance that change, no matter how fragile, was rooted deep within, waiting to blossom fully. The scene lingers on his peaceful face, bathed in soft light, a symbol of quiet resistance and hope, the moment of understanding that even the smallest ripple can start a wave. The stage was bathed in a gentle, amber glow as Jamal stepped to the center, the vast auditorium hushed in reverence. His tall, lanky figure was calm now, every nerve attuned to the weight of history beneath his feet. The worn notebook, intricately bound with symbols of broken chains, remnants of battles fought and victories won, clutched in his hand, was a bridge between pain and renewal. Across the polished wooden floor, the audience sat in silent anticipation, a tapestry of faces reflecting a spectrum of hope, memories, and silent tears. Jamal took a slow breath, feeling the warmth of the stage beneath his feet, anchoring him in the moment despite the storm of emotions swirling within. He lifted his voice, steadying it with the legacy of generations of voices before him, whispering truths that refused to be silenced. In the midst of silent shadows, our echoes roar with justice and love, we reclaim what was always ours. His words, raw and unapologetic, echoed like a broken chain cracking open, unleashing the weight of systemic oppression. The auditorium seemed to breathe with him, each listener absorbing the unfiltered power of his voice, a voice that refused to be drowned out, a spark ignited in the darkness. As Jamal's verse drew to a close, the silence was thick yet reverent, broken only by a ripple of slow, deliberate applause. Faces blurred into an ocean of recognition, some shedding quiet tears, others meeting his gaze with looks of renewed understanding. In the back, Kyle remained seated, his face a mask of introspection and reluctant respect, a stark contrast to the boy who once cowered and silenced himself. The broken chain emblem on Jamal's notebook appeared to shimmer softly, a symbol of hope reborn. Jamal stepped back, his chest rising and falling in a deep, steadying breath. A gentle, almost imperceptible smile touched his lips in acknowledgement that his fight, his voice, was no longer invisible. The scene faded into a panoramic Showthem silhouetted against the glowing horizon, his presence a testament to resilience and change. A new dawn stretched across the sky, casting golden light that seeped into every corner of the room, illuminating the path ahead. The camera lingered, capturing Jamal's peaceful expression, a boy transformed into a messenger of justice, standing on the cusp of a future built on truth, courage, and shared humanity. The silence, heavy yet hopeful, remained a testament to the power of even the smallest voice to ignite monumental change. The stage was bathed in a tranquil, amber glow, casting a gentle warmth across the empty auditorium. Jamal, standing alone at the center, looked out over the silent sea of seats, each a vessel of stories, struggles, and hopes. His tall, lanky figure seemed insignificantly small against the vastness of the space, yet within him burned a quiet fire, steady and resilient. His worn notebook rested on the podium, the pages now filled with the echoes of a journey from silence to voice, from invisibility to recognition. The broken chain symbol on its cover shimmered softly, a testament to the barriers that had once imprisoned him and the strength it took to shatter them. The dim light filtered through the stained glass windows, illuminating streaks of color that danced gently across the walls, a luminous reminder of the beauty born from struggles and the power of truth. As Jamal took a slow, deliberate breath, the air around him seemed to hum with the collective hopes of those who fought, faltered, and finally stood. He gently opened his mouth, a fragile breath escaping before words took shape. His voice, now steady and clear, carried across the hushed space. This is our voice. No longer silent. No longer invisible. Each syllable was a seed planted in undisturbed soil, its roots reaching deep into hearts and minds, reaching for a future rooted in justice and understanding. The broken chain emblem echoed softly in the silence, a symbol of overcoming silence broken, chains shattered. Behind him, the first light of dawn seeped through the stained glass, splintering into shards of radiant color, a silent testament to hope that endures beyond shadows. Jamal's eyes, shining softly, reflected the dawn, a visual of realization. Even the smallest voice can ignite monumental change. He closed his eyes briefly, feeling the warmth of the moment, the culmination of years of silent battles. His hands, steady now, lifted his notebook in a quiet Salutian act of defiance and affirmation. The camera slowly pulled back, capturing his silhouette against the awakening light, a monument to resilience and the enduring human spirit. As the scene faded into a gentle silence, the quiet carried the weight of 1,000 stories, a testament to hope's quiet, unstoppable power, the moment where justice and peace found their enduring voice. Have you ever underestimated the power of words? Share your thoughts below.